I still remember the exact way he closed the door behind him that morning, a soft click that sounded unbearably final, like the last page of a book sliding shut. He stood in the hallway with his suitcase, eyes avoiding mine, and said, almost apologetically, "I think it's best if I go." His voice was steady, as if he had rehearsed it, but there was a brittle edge I'd never heard before. I nodded because what else was there to do? He kissed the top of my head the way he always had, murmured something about needing space, and walked out into the rain. I watched his taillights disappear and then went through the motions of the day like a ghost, making coffee, getting the kids ready, replying to emails with a calm that felt borrowed. People called and asked questions. I answered with a version of the story that felt safe and neat. We need time apart. It's complicated. But alone, in the hollow quiet of the house, a small, insistent part of me refused to accept that everything could be reduced to complicated. I'd seen that look in his eyes before, the one that hid more than it revealed. I had a feeling that goodbye was not an ending but the curtain before a reveal. At noon I found the first breadcrumb. I went to the garage to gather a box of old holiday decorations and, tucked behind a stack of camping gear, my hand brushed something cold and metal, a small, unremarkable key on a cheap ring. There was a tag with a storage unit number written in his handwriting. For a moment I stared at it, the key suddenly heavy in my palm. It was nothing, I told myself. He rented a unit for extra tools, old furniture. But the sentence in his eyes when he left, the way he didn't look at me, kept repeating. I slipped the key into my pocket. It's funny, grief often does two things at once. It makes your world tiny and enormous. Tiny because the room where you once argued over what color to paint the kitchen seems to contain the entire universe. Enormous because suddenly everything you didn't know feels like a chasm. I could have called my sister, or a friend, or even the number he had given me as an emergency contact. Instead, I drove to the storage facility at the far edge of town, heart thudding in my throat, rain blotting the windshield into smeared watercolors. The unit door rolled up with an annoyingly ordinary clack. Inside, amid a jumble of boxes and a battered futon, were neat stacks of bankers' boxes labeled with typed dates. His careful mind had recorded everything. I began to pull documents like a person rifling through someone else's soul: bank statements, a stack of envelopes from an offshore bank, contracts with someone named A. Morales, and, most damningly, a thin leather folder with our names on it, joint assets. My hands felt cool and steady at first. The rational part of me catalogued facts. Then the rawness arrived, like an animal, and I had to sit down on a crate to breathe. In the folder were things I hadn't expected. For years I'd trusted his assurances about finances, about the future. Here were transfers, months of them, moving small, clever amounts from accounts I thought were joint into accounts registered under shell companies. The pattern was a spiderweb: $5,000 here, $2,500 there, timed just after our mortgage payment, after a charity donation, always small enough not to trigger alarms. A note on the underside of a receipt, his handwriting again, read, "Transfer to reserve, start January." Reserve for what? For a plan, I understood. That did not include me. I could have dropped everything in a fury, torn to the garage, and raged until the world acknowledged what he'd done. I could have called him, accused him, begged for explanations. I could have stood on the street corner and let the neighbors see the ragged, betrayed person he had created. But I have always believed in doing one smart thing rather than many angry ones. So I locked the unit, slid the key back into my coat, and drove home as if I had only gone to run an errand. That afternoon I opened my laptop and typed the name of an attorney I'd once used for a minor contract dispute. Her email address still autofilled on my screen as if waiting. I wrote a terse message: "Found documents. Need to talk. Urgent." Then I called my brother, but not to ask what to do, to say I might need to be away for a day or two and could he pick the kids up if necessary. I lied smoothly about a sudden work trip and felt the iron in my chest harden into resolve. By evening, the first legal appointment was set. Sophia, sharp, direct, with a voice that made you do what she suggested without thinking twice, told me what I already suspected. "Do not confront him," she said. "Not now. He is likely to destroy, delete, move. We need to freeze accounts, secure documents, and file for temporary protective orders if you fear asset flight. We also need to preserve evidence. Anything you found today, scans, photos, keep them safe, and don't discuss them widely. Her words were an anchor. I spent that night cataloging. I took high-resolution photos of everything in the folder, uploaded copies to a cloud account under my maiden name, and mailed myself an encrypted USB with scanned copies so there would be a paper trail independent of my home. It felt wildly paranoid and perfectly necessary. The more I worked, the more methodical I felt. My grief, it turned out, had a spine. Some secrets are petty, some are criminal. I wasn't sure where his fell yet. But detail after detail began to cohere into a pattern that smelled of planning. There were trips charged to cards he claimed were for work but paid out to bed and breakfasts in towns 3 hours away. There were payments to a local contractor who had never shown up at our house. There were small stacks of receipts for hotel rooms near the airport. Each paper was a thread, and I began weaving them into a rope. When the news came, he had booked a one-way ticket to a city 3 hours away and was due to fly out in less than 48 hours, the clock turned into a drum. Sophia arranged an emergency filing to freeze our joint bank accounts and put holds on transfers. We applied for an injunction to prevent asset dispersal. The clerk at the bank looked at me with that professional sympathy that doesn't touch the heart, stamped forms, and made phone calls. My hands shook while I signed. But the handshake of the law felt steadier than the hand that had promised me forever. That night he texted me, 3 short messages. We need space. This is too hard. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The papers I had catalogued replied for me. Sophia advised me to avoid verbal exchanges and let the record speak. It felt strange and a little cold, but also absolutely right. When he walked back into the house 2 days later, as if to collect a coat or a particular mug, I watched him from the kitchen doorway. He carried the same tired, rehearsed expression. Guilt didn't visit his face. He glanced at me, and for a ridiculous second, there was a flash of something I used to love. Then he saw my unreadable face and went past without stopping. I thought of the storage unit and the hidden ledger, of the tickets and transfers. The man I had married was still there, a body moving through rooms, but the map of his life no longer included me. There's a strange clarity that comes when you act immediately. The world narrows to facts, dates, account numbers, signed affidavits, and the loud emotional noise recedes into a low, manageable hum. I booked a meeting with a forensic accountant recommended by Sophia and began assembling witness lists, colleagues, bank clerks who might have seen suspicious activity, anyone who could corroborate that he'd been moving money. I also photographed private moments, not to shame but to create a continuous record of our household as it had been. That night I made a pot of tea and sat at the kitchen table with Lily's school drawing taped to the fridge and the thick folder of evidence in front of me. I felt tired to my bones, but there was a fierce warmth too, not joy, but a sense of agency. He had left, perhaps thinking his goodbye would let him vanish cleanly, unaccounted for. Instead, he had set in motion something that would finally force him to answer. I had acted immediately, and in that action I found the start of my own reclamation. The following morning, the house felt unnaturally still, as though even the walls were listening to what I would do next. I sat at the dining table with a mug of coffee that had gone cold in my hands, staring at the same page of a notebook where I had written lists the night before. Steps. People to contact. Evidence to gather. But more than that, I kept replaying his final look as he walked past me. That look wasn't of regret, it was calculation. It was the look of someone weighing options, not grieving a marriage. And that, more than any document or receipt, confirmed what I needed to know. He had been planning this for longer than I could admit. By mid-morning, I drove to Sophia's office, a modest building tucked into the center of town. The receptionist gave me a look of quiet compassion as she led me in. Sophia greeted me with her brisk, businesslike manner, but that day, her tone softened just slightly. "You've done well," she said, tapping the folder I had brought. "It's thorough. This gives us leverage." Leverage. The word echoed in my mind. Once, marriage had been about trust, partnership, compromise. Now it was about leverage, who had more proof, who had the legal edge. Sophia explained the next steps in careful detail. "We'll file motions to protect assets immediately. I'll also need to subpoena records from the offshore accounts. That will take time, but the paper trail you found makes it easier to prove intent. And, she paused, looking at me over her glasses, we need to prepare for the possibility of infidelity. Some of these hotel receipts suggest that. I swallowed hard. I had been pushing that thought into the corner of my mind. Money could be explained away, poor decisions, bad investments, paranoia about savings. But infidelity, that was different. That wasn't just betrayal of trust, that was betrayal of intimacy. Do I have to know? I asked quietly. Sophia gave a small shrug. It's your choice. Sometimes clients want every detail. Sometimes they prefer not to look. But if it comes to court, his patterns will be relevant. We can hire a private investigator if you want confirmation. I nodded, though inside I felt a storm brewing. Did I really want to see pictures of him with someone else? Did I need that wound on top of everything else? I didn't know yet, but I filed the option away like another box in the storage unit of my mind. That afternoon, after leaving Sophia's office, I found myself parked in front of the school earlier than usual, waiting for the kids. The playground echoed with laughter, sneakers pounding against blacktop. Watching them, I felt a fierce resolve rise up in me. Whatever else happened, they would not suffer because of this. His choices would not bleed into their stability. They didn't need to know the details now. But one day, maybe, when they were older, they would see that their mother had acted not out of vengeance but out of strength. When he finally called me that evening, the tone of his voice had shifted. We should talk, he said, as though he hadn't disappeared days earlier with a suitcase. What about? I asked, keeping my voice level. About us. About the future. I don't want the kids caught in the middle. I think I've made mistakes. Mistakes. The word made me clench my jaw. Mistakes were forgetting to take the trash out, misplacing a receipt, burning dinner. This was no mistake. This was deliberate. But I didn't let my anger show. All right, I said calmly. Come by tomorrow evening. We'll talk. The next day, I prepared the house carefully. I set my phone on the counter, recording quietly. Sophia had advised me, keep records. Always. I placed a manila folder on the dining table, empty but looking official. It was a small psychological trick, but I wanted him to feel that I had papers of my own, that the ground beneath him wasn't as steady as he thought. When he arrived, he looked thinner, paler. His eyes darted around as though checking if someone else was present. He sat heavily in the chair across from me. You froze the accounts, he said flatly. I did, I replied. That wasn't fair. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. My voice cut sharper than I intended, but I didn't back down. I understand storage units, offshore accounts, hotel receipts. And I understand that you were planning something that excluded me, and probably the kids too. So tell me, what exactly do I not understand? For a long moment, he said nothing. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. Then he sighed, leaning back, and gave a humorless chuckle. I should have known you'd find out. You always were smarter than I gave you credit for. The words stung, but also confirmed everything. He had underestimated me. He thought his goodbye would be the last word. He began to talk, slowly at first, then faster, as if once the dam broke he couldn't stop the flood. He admitted he had been moving money, but insisted it was to protect us. He said he'd gotten involved with people he couldn't easily step away from. That Morales wasn't a mistress but a business partner, though his definition of business grew vaguer the more I pressed. There were contracts, he said, obligations he couldn't break without consequences. Consequences like what? I asked. He rubbed his temples. Like, people showing up at our door. Like debts being called in ways you don't want to imagine. The words chilled me. Suddenly the financial betrayal seemed like only the surface of a deeper, darker story. I sat back, steadying my breath. So you were planning to disappear. With the money. Without us. His silence was answer enough. That night, after he left, slamming the door this time, anger replacing the weary sadness of before, I called Sophia again. It's worse than I thought, I told her. He's involved with people. Dangerous people. She was quiet for a moment before replying. Then we have to move faster. We'll request emergency custody protections, in case his choices put the children at risk. And you need to be cautious. Very cautious. Sleep was impossible. I kept pacing, hearing his words replay in my head, the half-confessions, the glimpses of something much larger than I had suspected. What kind of people was he involved with? What exactly had he promised them? And most importantly, how much danger were we in now that I had stepped into his secret? By dawn, I knew one thing for certain: his goodbye had not been an ending. It was the opening of a labyrinth. And I had only just taken the first step inside. The sun rose slowly, but it felt like it was dragging the weight of the night behind it. My thoughts hadn't rested. Every sound outside, a car door, footsteps on the street, even the hum of the refrigerator, felt like a threat. He said there were people involved, dangerous ones, and I couldn't stop imagining them watching us, waiting. By mid-morning, I pulled myself together. I couldn't let fear paralyze me, not with 2 kids who depended on me. I made them breakfast as though nothing was wrong, smiling when they laughed, listening to their little arguments about who got the blue cup. But every glance at the window, every sound of the front gate shifting in the breeze, pulled me back to the storm building outside the fragile walls of our life. Once they were at school, I drove straight to Sophia's office again. She had already filed for emergency protections. She explained the next steps carefully, her tone steady, though her eyes betrayed concern. He's admitted to being entangled with people he can't easily walk away from. That's more serious than I initially thought, she said. It means his behavior isn't just reckless, it's potentially criminal. The word criminal sliced through me. This wasn't the man I had married, the man who once promised to build a safe, steady life with me. That man seemed like a faded photograph now, a ghost behind the man who had left with a suitcase and secrets. What happens if they come after me? Or the kids? I asked quietly. Sophia leaned forward. That's why we're moving quickly. I've already contacted someone I trust, a security consultant. Not police yet. Not unless we need to. But someone who can help keep eyes on the house, at least temporarily. Her efficiency gave me something to cling to. I left her office feeling steadier, though the unease never left completely. Later that day, as I was driving home, I noticed a black sedan parked at the corner of my street. It wasn't unusual for cars to park there, but something about it, the way the windows were tinted too dark, the way the engine idled even though no one seemed to move inside, made my skin crawl. I pulled into the driveway slowly, forcing myself not to look in the rearview mirror too often. Once inside, I locked every door, every window, double-checked the back gate. I even closed the curtains in rooms I usually left open. My pulse didn't slow until I finally sat on the living room couch and breathed deeply. That evening, when he called again, I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. You don't understand, but you will. Don't make this harder than it has to be. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even regret. It was a warning. For the first time since he had left, I felt the sharp sting of anger overpower the fear. He thought he could control the narrative, keep me quiet, make me bend to his chaos. But he underestimated me again. The next day, Sophia arranged for me to meet the consultant she mentioned. His name was Daniel, mid-40s, calm, with a presence that seemed both grounded and alert. He had worked in law enforcement before going private, and when he spoke, I felt a strange sense of security return. I'll set up discreet surveillance, he explained, sliding a tablet across the table to show me. Cameras, motion sensors. Nothing obvious, but enough to give us early warnings. If that car returns, we'll know who's inside. I nodded, grateful. And if they do come? He gave a half-smile, though his eyes stayed serious. Then I'll know before you do. That's the point. That night, after the kids were asleep, I stood at the window and watched the street. The black sedan was gone, at least for now. But the unease remained, wrapping around me like a second skin. 2 days later, Sophia called with news. We've traced some of the money. Not all, but enough to show intent. Offshore accounts, hidden transfers, even ties to shell companies. If this goes to court, He'll have a lot to answer for." Her voice carried triumph, but mine did not. Because even with the financial evidence stacking up, I knew money wasn't the most dangerous part of his secret. The dangerous part was the people he was tangled with. That weekend, I decided to confront him directly. Not with anger, but with strategy. I texted him, simple and clear, "Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m. at the cafe near the park. No kids. Just us." To my surprise, he agreed. When I arrived, the cafe was quiet, only a few customers scattered among the tables. I chose a booth near the window, where the light poured in, making it harder for him to hide behind shadows. He walked in 10 minutes late, wearing the same leather jacket he used to wear on our early dates. For a brief second, I saw the man I had once loved. But then I remembered the black sedan, the offshore accounts, the suitcase, and the illusion shattered. He sat across from me, folding his hands. His eyes flicked to the street outside, then back to me. Paranoid. On edge. "You're making this worse," he started. "You froze the money, you've got lawyers circling me, and now they're watching." "Who's they?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He glanced toward the window again. "You don't need to know. The less you know, the safer you are." "I don't believe that," I said, leaning forward. "You put us all in danger. The kids. Me. If you think I'll just sit quietly and let you handle this, you don't know me at all." His jaw tightened. For a moment, it looked like he might argue, but then he leaned back, exhaling. "I wanted to protect you. But I can't anymore. They'll want answers. And if I can't give them what they want, they'll look elsewhere." His words hung in the air like smoke. I left the cafe more determined than ever. I couldn't rely on him to protect us, he wasn't capable of it anymore. Whatever he had gotten into, he was in too deep. That night, I wrote everything down, every detail, every timeline, every piece of evidence I had collected. I locked it in a safe Sophia had given me, along with copies she kept at her office. Because if this spiraled further, if the shadows he had dragged into our lives tried to pull us under, I wanted to make sure one thing was clear: I was ready. The following morning, I woke to the sound of tapping against the window. For a split second, I thought it was just the tree branch brushing against the glass, but when I pulled the curtain back, my heart raced. The black sedan was back, parked even closer this time, directly across from my driveway. Daniel had already installed the cameras, so I tried to calm myself. I made breakfast for the kids, packed their bags for school, and kissed them goodbye like it was any ordinary day. But inside, I was shaking. As soon as they were gone, I called Daniel. Within minutes, he arrived, quiet but deliberate in his movements. He stood at the window with me, watching the car. "They've been here for at least 20 minutes, I whispered, even though I knew they couldn't hear me from outside. He nodded, scanning the scene. "I'll check the footage. Stay inside. Don't engage. Whoever they are, they're watching for a reason." The next few hours dragged on. Every tick of the clock felt amplified. I busied myself with cleaning, laundry, anything to distract my mind, but every few minutes I found myself back at the window, peeking through the blinds. By afternoon, Daniel returned with what he had pulled from the cameras. He showed me stills, 2 men inside the sedan. One in his late 30s, sharp haircut, sunglasses, the other older, perhaps mid-50s, his face harder to read. They never got out of the car. They just watched. "This isn't random," Daniel said firmly. "These men are connected to your husband's mess. They're keeping tabs, maybe waiting for him, maybe trying to see if you know anything." A chill ran through me. "So what do we do?" "For now," Daniel said, "we keep documenting. And we don't let them scare you." But fear was exactly what they wanted, and it was working. That night, every creak in the house, every gust of wind rattling the shutters made me jump. 2 days later, my husband called again. His voice was tense, almost frantic. "You need to stop whatever you're doing. Stop with the lawyers. Stop with the games. They're watching you now. Don't you get it? You're making yourself a target." I closed my eyes, listening to his voice, the same voice that used to comfort me, now laced with desperation. "You put us here," I whispered. "Not me." And then I hung up. The silence afterward was deafening. Sophia called that evening with more news. The accounts are unraveling. He's been hiding more than we thought. This isn't just about debts, it's about laundering. And the companies tied to it. Some of them are linked to very dangerous names. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, but instead of clarity, all I felt was dread. That weekend, Daniel insisted on staying nearby. It's escalating, he explained. If they're watching, they're waiting for something. Maybe your husband. Maybe leverage. On Sunday night, as I sat in the living room with the curtains drawn, I heard a noise outside, not just a car this time, but footsteps. My breath caught in my throat. Daniel, who had been checking the monitors, raised a hand, signaling me to stay still. Through the screen, we saw one of the men from the sedan approach the front gate. He didn't try to break in, but he stood there for several minutes, smoking a cigarette, scanning the house like he owned it. Finally, he flicked the cigarette to the ground and walked back to the car. My stomach twisted. What do they want? I asked Daniel when the car finally drove away. Pressure, he said. They're showing you they can get close. They want you scared enough to back off. But you're not going to give them that satisfaction. I nodded, though my hands were trembling. The next day, Sophia arranged an urgent meeting with a federal investigator she trusted. His name was Ramirez, mid-40s, calm but with eyes that seemed to see right through me. He listened as I explained everything, the accounts, the sedan, the confrontation with my husband. This isn't just domestic anymore, Ramirez said finally. This has the marks of organized crime. You've done the right thing documenting everything. But if you want protection, you'll need to cooperate fully. That means giving us everything you have on your husband. The words hit me hard. Cooperating meant betraying him fully, handing over his secrets to people who could put him away for years. But then I thought of the kids, the car outside, the man at my gate. And I realized I had no choice. I agreed. For the next week, my life became a blur of interviews, paperwork, handing over files and timelines. Ramirez's team set up extra surveillance around my home, though discreetly, so the neighbors wouldn't suspect anything. My husband called less frequently now, but when he did, his voice was more frantic each time. You don't know what you're doing, he said during one call. If you bring them into this, it's not just me who pays. For a brief second, I almost felt pity for him. He sounded broken, desperate. But then I remembered the cigarette man at my gate, the fear in my children's eyes when they asked why I kept locking every door twice. And the pity vanished. One night, I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I looked around the house, at the life I had built, the family photos on the walls, the toys scattered across the floor. And I promised myself, I will not let his choices destroy us. The days that followed were heavy with uncertainty. My husband, my estranged, secretive husband, was living in the same house as me, yet it felt like there were walls of stone between us. He avoided deep conversations, often burying himself in his phone or staying late at work. At times, I wondered if he thought I hadn't noticed the weight of his lies pressing down on both of us. But I noticed. And it was eating me alive. One evening, as the soft rain tapped against the window, I sat across from him at the dinner table. The silence stretched like a rope pulled too tight. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady but my heart pounding. Do you love me? I asked plainly. He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Slowly, he set it down, eyes lowering to the plate as if the mashed potatoes could offer him an escape. Why would you ask me something like that? He muttered. Because, I whispered, my throat tightening, your actions don't show it anymore. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, with a weary sigh, he looked at me. His eyes were tired, lined with something deeper than fatigue, guilt, perhaps. It's not that simple, he said. Those words echoed in my head long after dinner was over. Not that simple. My chest ached with the weight of them. If he was truly hiding something from me, then I had to know what it was. That night, when he finally drifted to sleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The storm outside rattled the windows, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside me. I thought about the documents I had found, about the sudden emotional distance, About the goodbye he had whispered that night in the kitchen as though he was preparing me for something. I turned to look at him, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. A part of me wanted to shake him awake and demand the truth. But another part, the part that feared what that truth might be, kept me still. Instead, I made a choice. Tomorrow, I would follow him. The next morning, I feigned normalcy. I kissed him on the cheek as he headed out the door, his briefcase in hand. He gave me a faint smile, but his eyes were elsewhere, like a man walking with ghosts. Once he left, I grabbed my jacket and quietly tailed him in my car, keeping several vehicles between us. He didn't notice. He never noticed, too lost in his own world. I expected him to go to his office. But he didn't. Instead, he drove across town, weaving through streets I barely recognized, until he stopped at a small, modest house in a quiet neighborhood. My pulse quickened as I parked discreetly nearby. I watched him step out of the car, his posture tense, his eyes scanning the area as though making sure no one saw him. Then the door opened. A woman stood there, mid-30s, with kind eyes and a tired smile. She looked at him like she had been waiting for him. He walked inside without hesitation. My stomach dropped. I sat frozen in my car, the air thick with panic. Who was she? Why was he here? 1,000 scenarios flooded my mind. Was this an affair? Was he living a double life? I waited. Minutes passed like hours. Eventually, I forced myself out of the car and crept closer, careful not to be seen. I peeked through the thin curtain of a front window. What I saw made my heart lurch. Inside the living room sat a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She had his eyes. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. My world tilted on its axis. He had a child. A child I never knew about. Tears blurred my vision as I hurried back to my car, shaking. I gripped the steering wheel, gasping for air, the weight of betrayal crashing over me like a tidal wave. All those late nights. All those whispered goodbyes. All the distance. It wasn't just guilt, it was a secret family. I drove home, my mind unraveling. The evidence was undeniable, yet a part of me screamed for more answers. Who was that woman? Was she his mistress? His first love? Or, was that child born before me, hidden away all these years? By the time he returned that evening, I had resolved to confront him. When he walked in, he looked startled to see me waiting in the living room, my arms crossed, eyes red from tears. "Where were you?" I asked sharply. He froze, then quickly masked his expression. "Work ran late. Don't lie to me." My voice cracked, but I held firm. "I know where you were. I saw her. I saw the little girl." The color drained from his face. He set his briefcase down slowly, like a man caught in the act. For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Then, his shoulders slumped, and he whispered, "You weren't supposed to find out like this." The next hours blurred together, filled with raw confessions and truths that shattered the life I thought I knew. The little girl was his daughter. Born years ago, before he even met me. He had been in a serious relationship, one that fell apart before marriage. When the woman got pregnant, he promised to provide but never told me once we married. He admitted that his constant goodbyes, his secret visits, were his way of trying to be present in his daughter's life while keeping it hidden from me, afraid that the truth would destroy our marriage. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. I felt betrayed, devastated, and yet, strangely, part of me understood. But what I couldn't forgive was the secrecy. The choice he made to live 2 lives, forcing me to live in the shadow of lies. I stayed silent long after he finished, my heart torn between rage and heartbreak. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "You should have told me. From the very beginning. Do you have any idea what it feels like to discover your life is built on lies?" He dropped his head into his hands. "I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave me. Afraid of losing everything." "You already have," I whispered. That night, I couldn't sleep beside him. I lay awake, staring at the empty side of the bed where he once felt like home. And in that emptiness, I realized something. My life would never be the same again. The morning after his confession, The silence in our home was deafening. I went about my routine, making coffee, preparing breakfast, but every movement felt heavy, as though I were dragging chains behind me. My husband sat across the table, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling slightly as he held his cup. We didn't speak. Not at first. Finally, I broke the silence. "I can't live like this anymore," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator. His head snapped up. Please don't say that. I can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." I stared at him, tears welling in my eyes. "Do you even understand what you've done? You built our entire marriage on a lie. You didn't trust me with the truth. You didn't trust us. And now I don't know if I can trust you at all." He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back before his fingers touched mine. The rejection broke something in his expression, his face crumpled with regret. "Let me explain more," he begged. "Please, just give me that chance." I nodded stiffly. "Talk." But this time, no lies. He told me everything. Every detail. He had met the woman, her name was Anna, years before me. They were engaged, but the relationship fell apart due to constant fighting and family pressure. Shortly after they split, Anna found out she was pregnant. My husband, then just her fiancé, swore to support her and their child, but he felt ashamed and hid the truth from everyone, even his own family. Then he met me, fell in love with me, married me, and instead of confessing his past, he buried it. But Anna held him to his word. She never asked him for money, but she asked him to be present for their daughter, at least in small ways. He agreed, slipping away to visit, sending support secretly, always trying to keep me from finding out. When I discovered his documents, when I saw that little girl with my own eyes, the fragile walls of secrecy he had built came crashing down. And now, all I felt was betrayal. After he finished speaking, I sat in silence, my heart pounding. The rain tapped against the window as though echoing the storm inside me. "So, all those nights you came home late," I said finally. "All those business trips, the excuses, you were with her. With your daughter." He nodded slowly, shame in his eyes. "Yes." I clenched my fists beneath the table. "Do you realize how humiliating this is for me? Do you realize what it feels like to be the last to know the truth about my own husband's life?" He lowered his gaze. "I know. I've been a coward. But I swear, there's nothing romantic between Anna and me anymore. I only wanted to be there for my daughter. That's it." His words stung with honesty, but they didn't erase the damage. That afternoon, I packed a bag. "I need space," I told him as I zipped it shut. He stood in the doorway, his face pale. "Please, don't leave." "I'm not leaving forever," I said coldly. "But I can't breathe in this house right now. I need time to think." And with that, I walked out. I spent the next few days at my sister's place. She welcomed me with open arms, though I didn't tell her everything. I wasn't ready for anyone else to know the full truth, not yet. In those quiet nights at her apartment, I lay awake replaying everything. His lies. His confession. The image of that little girl with his eyes staring back at me. Part of me raged with anger. Part of me mourned the man I thought I knew. But another part of me, unexpected, unwanted, felt something else. Sympathy. Because that child wasn't at fault. She didn't ask for this life. She didn't choose secrecy. And she certainly didn't choose to grow up hidden in the shadows of her father's guilt. The more I thought about her, the more conflicted I became. Could I hate a child for existing? Could I turn my back on her, even though she shared blood with the man I once loved so fiercely? On the fourth day, my husband came to see me. We sat in my sister's living room, the air thick with tension. "I can't lose you," he said desperately. "I know I made terrible choices, but please, don't let this be the end of us." I crossed my arms, my voice sharp. "You don't get to ask me that. Not after lying to me for years." His eyes filled with tears, his voice breaking. "I only kept it from you because I loved you. I was terrified that if you knew, you'd walk away. And I couldn't bear that." I scoffed. "And now you think I'll just forgive you?" "No," he whispered. "But I'm praying that you'll at least try. That night, after he left, I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. My heart felt torn in two directions, one screaming for freedom from his lies, the other aching at the thought of losing him. But beneath it all, one thought pulsed louder than the rest. If I don't act now, I'll drown in this uncertainty forever. The next morning, I made my decision. I called him. "Meet me tomorrow," I said. "Not at home. At the house." "At her house." There was silence on the line. Then, slowly, he agreed. And just like that, my course was set. I was going to face the truth head on. I was going to meet the woman. I was going to look into the eyes of that child and decide once and for all if my marriage could survive this secret. The day came with heavy clouds hanging over the city. My husband and I drove in silence, the car filled with unspoken tension. When we finally pulled up to Anna's modest home, my heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst from my chest. Anna opened the door, surprise flashing across her face when she saw me standing beside him. "This is her?" she asked quietly, her gaze soft but wary. "Yes," I said firmly, stepping forward. "I'm his wife. And it's time we all stopped living in shadows." Anna studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. She stepped aside, allowing us in. And then I saw her again. The little girl. Sitting on the couch, her small hands clutching a stuffed toy, her eyes wide with curiosity. She looked at me. And in that instant, my world shifted. The little girl's eyes locked with mine, and time seemed to freeze. She was no older than 7, maybe 8. Her hair was tied back in 2 uneven braids, and her clothes were simple jeans and a pink sweater that looked just a bit too big for her. But what struck me most was her gaze. She had his eyes. The same warm brown, with that same curious glint I'd once fallen in love with. My chest tightened, and I had to force myself to breathe. "This is Emily," Anna said softly, her hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder. Emily. The name made my heart clench even tighter. I swallowed hard, trying to find words. "Hi, Emily." She gave me a shy smile, clutching her stuffed toy tighter. "Hi." Her voice was so innocent, so untouched by the weight of the lies that had twisted the lives of the adults around her. In that moment, my anger wavered. I didn't see a secret. I didn't see betrayal. I saw a child who deserved love, stability, and truth. And I knew deep down that how I handled this would define not just my marriage, but who I was as a person. We sat down together, the 4 of us. The air was thick with tension, but there was no yelling, no outbursts. I think we were all too exhausted, too broken from years of hiding and pretending. Anna spoke first. "I never wanted to cause trouble between you two. But she deserves her father. I can't change what happened in the past, but I wanted him to be there for her even in small ways." I looked at her, searching her face for deceit, but all I saw was weariness and sincerity. She wasn't my enemy. She was a woman who had been carrying her own share of the burden. My husband sat beside me, his hands clasped tightly, his shoulders hunched. He looked smaller somehow, humbled by the reality of us all being in one room together. Finally, I spoke. "This isn't Emily's fault. She didn't ask for any of this. And if I punish her because of your lies," I glanced sharply at my husband, "then I'm no better than the secrets that brought us here." Tears filled his eyes, and he nodded quickly. "You're right. You're absolutely right." The hours that followed were surreal. Emily warmed up to me slowly, showing me her drawings, telling me about her favorite teacher, even giggling when I asked about her toy. The walls between us, built by years of deception, began to crumble. But inside, I was still torn. When we left Anna's house later that evening, my husband looked at me with desperation. "So, what happens now?" I didn't answer right away. The weight of the day pressed on me like a storm cloud. Finally, I said, "Now? Now we stop lying. No more secrets. If I stay, if we even have a chance of fixing this, you will be transparent about everything, your daughter, your time with her, your life. I will not be blindsided again." His breath hitched. "I promise. I'll do anything." I met his eyes, my voice steady. "Good. Because this is your last chance." The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. At first, I avoided him, my heart still raw with betrayal. But little by little, as he kept his word, sharing openly, answering every question without hesitation, I began to see a change in him. He wasn't perfect. The damage wasn't erased. But he was trying, truly trying, in a way I had never seen before. And Emily. She became a part of my world too. At first, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. But every time she smiled at me, every time she laughed, something inside me softened. I realized I had been given a choice, to let bitterness poison me, or to embrace a truth bigger than my pride. So I chose the latter. One evening, months later, we were all at the park together. Emily was running across the grass, chasing a kite her father had bought her, her laughter ringing through the air. I stood a little distance away, watching, my heart conflicted but strangely full. My husband walked up beside me, his eyes fixed on his daughter. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" I asked, my voice calm. "For not walking away. For giving me, giving us, a chance." I looked at him, his face lined with regret but also something else, humility. "Growth. I'm not forgiving you easily," I warned. "It'll take time. Maybe a lifetime. But I won't let a lie define me. Or her." He nodded, his expression solemn. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve this second chance." And that's when I realized. The way I handled this wasn't just about him. It wasn't even just about me. It was about a child who deserved love, about breaking free from secrecy, and about showing strength where weakness could have destroyed everything. I could have chosen revenge. I could have walked away without ever looking back. But instead, I chose to face the truth head-on. And the result? It left everyone speechless. Because strength isn't always about leaving. Sometimes, it's about staying. About rebuilding. About deciding that love real, raw, and painfully honest is worth more than pride. Years later, when I look back on that storm in our marriage, I don't remember only the pain. I remember the moment I met Emily, the way her little hand slipped into mine, and the quiet decision I made to rise above the lies. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And in the end, that's what mattered most.